I got it. Thank you. Okay. You can help me tell me if I start gesturing and not having the microphone by my face. So be sure to speak up. So, hi everyone. I am Maryellen MacDonald, and for about 2 more weeks I am a professor of psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and then I will be retired. Yeah. And I am writing a book about talking and how talking helps tune your brain, and I do research on language, how we understand it, how we talk, how we write, and all sorts of stuff like that. And I'm really happy to be talking to you today about talking and aging, because I want to tell you that there's some good news and there's some bad news and there's some stuff you can do yourself. So let me, to help keep the good news coming, so let me grab my clicker here and say that as you get older, some of your language, some of your talking and your comprehending is actually getting better. And most people don't tell you that, but that is true. So here's a picture of people talking with each other and on one of a beautiful day like this, and at their age and at your age, there's some parts of language that are more tuned up and more going than when you were in high school or even in college. But, and this is the news that most people hear, is that sometimes your language is getting worse, and your talking is getting worse, and your understanding is getting worse, or it can. And we want to talk today about how to prevent that and focus on having things keep better and better and stay good. So I'm going to talk about both of these. Let's start. So back to what the good news. As you get older, as we all get older, your vocabulary is getting better. Your vocabulary right now is quite a bit bigger than you were 20 and able to run down the street or do all kinds of exciting things when you were 20. In fact, your vocabulary, people's vocabulary, gets better through their lifetime so regularly that the internet has ideas about this and wants to get people to predict someone's age by their vocabulary. They want you to click on this little thing because, in fact, they'll be able to predict your age with decent kind of accuracy by how big your vocabulary is. And that works because you're raking it in, those words, all your life. So, when you were a teenager, your vocabulary was still going. Yeah, you could do lots of things. You could dance and you could have your school picture taken and go to track meets and all that stuff, but your vocabulary was smaller and vocabulary tests were quite a bit harder than they are right now. So how will you do now? I'm going to show you a few vocabulary test questions that were made for 18-year-olds. And you can think about how you're doing now. You don't need to say out any answers at all. Just think in your head whether you know the answer, and we'll see how we do. Okay, so this was, it's part of the ACT test, College Readiness Test for 18-year-olds. And here are some vocabulary, multiple choice items. They might be, you might know some, you might not know some. Let's see. Maybe don't shout it out so that everybody else gets a chance to think about it. Okay, here's one. In something that's increasing gradually by regular degrees or additions. Is that maturation? Is that incremental, eroding, or interval? You can think about that one. And the answer for the best answer for this one is incremental, something gradually growing. Okay, let's try another one. Yeah. To lengthen or extend in duration or space. Precipitate, decelerate, prolong, or exhibit. Think about what your answer for that one was.
Prolong.
Prolong. It is prolong. Yeah. One more. Oh, maybe only not, no, only two. Sorry, I was worried. Oh, sorry. This is the third one. Involving or limited to basic principles. Rudimentary, evolution, static, or redundant. Rudimentary. There it is. So, probably you got some of those right. They're very challenging. Would have been challenging for you as an 18-year-old, despite all your, physical fitness and all of that. Your vocabulary grows your whole life, and it's bigger now than at all those other previous times. And that's some great news. And that is something that you can hold on to and help keep your brain tuned up and your talking and your communicating and your socializing all going. However, there are some downsides. Some language abilities get worse as we age. And I want to give you 2 examples and then some strategies to lean into your big vocabulary and stomp out the downsides. Okay? All right. So, first example. Your talking can get worse as you get older. Sometimes it gets hard to find the words you want.
Yep.
So, this is this phenomenon that you know that you know a word, or you know that you know someone's name, you know them, you know you saw them last week, you know you've said their name before, and you can't say it at that moment. It is so frustrating. It is just, yeah. Thank you. Someone has come to my aid.
Yay.
Yay, thank you, aid person. Now, you might think that this is a recent thing that happened, is starting to happen to you. What's happening is that you're recently starting to notice that it's more of a big deal, because a lot of studies show that this word finding problem, the can't think of the name or whatever, starts to get worse in your 30s. In your 30s, you were worse at it than you were in your 20s. Just a little bit, and then just a little bit more, and just a little bit more, and now it's kind of a thing. You really kind of feel it sometimes. Yes?
I've always said that I have trouble with names and jokes. I love jokes, but I can't retreat.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is I'm not an auditory learner. I need, I have to write to learn something, or read to learn something, or do something to learn something.
Right. So the comment here is very interesting. She says that she's always had trouble with names and jokes. And those two things are very similar in a particular way. You've got to get the word or words exactly right. Sometimes, if you can't think of some concept, you can find some other way to say it. But if you can't think of the name Mary Sue, well, you're kind of stuck. You can't just say, oh, hi, Betty. It's not going to work. You really need Mary Sue. And jokes, the punchline of a joke has to be those exact words. It's like the name. And if you can't get those exact words right, well, you've kind of screwed up the joke. So sometimes you can, for other things, get away with not remembering, like say, oh, I'll go over there or something. But for names and jokes, you got to really nail it. And those are hard. So, names and rare words, and I should say punchlines of jokes, are the hardest to find in your memory. let me give you, in the same way that you can have vocabulary tests where we can see your vocabulary growing, you could have tests of how well can you come up with a word or a name. And psychologists and gerontologists often give these tests to older people to see if your language is kind of like a typical 70-year-old, or if you're having more or less problems with remembering words, for example. So here, rather than a vocabulary test, I'm going to give you a definition and ask you to come up with the name. Again, don't shout it out. Let other people think about it. These are made to be hard, and hard for older people. So, a person who is unnecessarily anxious about his or her health and often suffers from imaginary illnesses. That is, a good word for it is a hypochondriac. And maybe you pulled up that name pretty easily, or word pretty easily. Here's another one. The art of elegant, highly decorative handwriting. I hear a few whispers, and I know some people have gotten it. Calligraphy, yes. So it's a funny thing. You can take those vocabulary tests and do better than the average 20-year-old. And you can take these, which is kind of like an inverse vocabulary test. You get the definition and you have to come up with a word, and you'll do worse than a 20-year-old. So what is that? That is about talking, really thinking of the words that you need to say, not just recognizing which definition goes with which word, but dragging out of your memory the words you need to talk about. Or, in this case, talk about, dragging it out to answer a question, but it also affects your conversation, your talking, your ability to converse with other people. And that's what is getting worse. You know those words, but in the moment, sometimes they don't come out. Now, we'll come back to how to fight that in a minute. Yeah, but I want to talk about a very different kind of way in which people's talking gets worse. And it's the following. People become less diplomatic and tactful in old age.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Yeah, so nowadays, you and I'm aging, I'm retiring, everybody, you're more likely to blurt out something you'll regret later than when you were younger. Maybe this is not you, maybe this is like the average of people who are growing older. So don't assume that you are fitting any one of these profiles, because we're all different. These are the general trends.
I'm in that category.
You're in that category. Well, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. The internet is often a speaker's friend in giving examples. So here is an example. On the internet, there's self-help for parents about what to do about the grandparents who are just kind of going off the handle and having conflicts with the kids. So the older adults, the grandparent generation, is angry at the kids, is can't kind of hold their tongue about what the kids are doing, and are not really the parents' idea about how it's so great to have grandpa and grandma around. In fact, they're these people who are kind of flying off the handle. So it's enough of a thing that the internet has several of these help things for parents about how to navigate their own parents not being too tactful anymore. Yeah. And here's another example. This comes from an advice column that I saw on April 25, just a couple of weeks ago. And the teenager dyed her hair, And Grandma went absolutely nuts. The teenager, she's burst into tears. She used to have this great relationship with Grandma. She wanted Grandma to say positive things and like it, and Grandma said, I hope it washes out, it looks terrible, or something like that. And it was sad. And the mom is right again, you know, kind of caught in the middle between the grandparent and her daughter who dyed her hair, wondering about how to navigate this. And, you know, yeah, to the grandparent, the hair looks terrible, right? But it's only hair, you know? And you probably, a few decades ago, or even a few years ago, or if it had been somebody else's grandkid, you could have said, only hair, you know, move on. Yeah.
I've been taking a class this semester at National College. It's just the rage of that age group, you know? It's just like, yeah, it's kind of cool. And I found every time I say to, it's usually girls, sometimes guys, hey, that's a nice hair color, they're pleased. They're happy to hear that.
Yeah, that is dyeing your hair different colors, I mean, including gray. Who would have thought that gray is such a hot color right now? It is, totally. See young people with gray hair. And as this person said, young people love to get compliments, and they still feel insecure. Remember feeling all insecure when you were a young person, or your kids were insecure? And giving them a little positive support, even if you wouldn't want it on yourself, that's a great thing. Yeah.
So like, we're fortunate enough to live on the isthmus, not far from Reese Stevens Field. So, you know, we see everything down there. And I've also found, besides the hair color, the tattoos, like
Yes.
cashier or wherever it is, somewhere at a gas station. And usually, often a young person, not always, but if I ask what the story is behind that tattoo, and they have time, there's usually an interesting story. They put that there for a reason, and they're happy to talk about it. I think, like, I don't know, something like 95% of the time or more, they're happy to talk about it.
That's right. So this comment was about tattoos, and this is another thing that our generation isn't wild about. Yet young people think of it as self-expression, rather like hair color. And as you say, there's a story behind why they chose that, and they would love you to show interest about their lives. And that's true. My daughter has several tattoos. They're pretty small. I'm not totally fond of any of them, but I work hard to be positive, or at least neutral about those things. And it's good to remember that we were all a bit rebellious in different ways in our youth. It's a natural process. It's leaving the nest and people finding their own ways. And if the grandparent, if your grandparent interactions seem to be fraught, I would suggest, if you can, just letting certain things go. Yeah.
I think the hair color and the tattoos and everything else, it's like when we were that age, it was showing independence. You know, showing I'm me, I'm an individual, I can do what I want, or whatever. There's a whole range, you know, whole colorful spectrum of why they do that. And that's their choice. You know, when we were that age, it was bell bottoms and love beats, you know?
That's right. We all had our ways of rebelling and showing that we were of our young generation and being unique and independent. And there was nothing wrong when we did that, and there's nothing wrong when these other generations do that. Of course, so I gave you a couple of grandparent examples, because many people are grandparents, but there are other examples of people maybe better hold your tongue in certain situations, and you can think of your own lives, and is it your neighbor or a coworker that if you're volunteering or anything, and you might try to recognize that as you get older, your brain makes it harder to bite your tongue, basically. Or, yeah. And so you may, I don't know, somebody's phone, it's not my phone. Oh well, okay. All right, so why did these changes happen? So the changes could be due to several things. Some changes may be due to our own behavior. Some things may be due to things that are out of our control. Our brain is changing. Our muscles are getting different. We are getting wrinkles. And, many of those things are a little bit out of our control. Or some things could be a combination of things we can do, and the brain is changing, but maybe there are some things in our control. And so I want to talk about strategies, recognizing that we have some stuff in our control, what we can do to talk better, use language better, tune our brains better, and so on. Yes?
Could some of it be due to medications and changes of medications? And like 2 years ago, I changed a certain med, and my behavior changed. And now it's taken about 19 months to get it back under control.
The question is, could you be having mental changes or talking, including language changes from a medication you're taking? Absolutely. And talking to your doctor about any side effects that you feel like you're seeing is really important, because often the doctor is focused on fixing one thing and might lose sight because they're not watching you every day with the side effects that are not really improving your quality of life, all told. And so that is something kind of out of your control. You need some medication, but kind of into your control. You can try to take charge of your health care and make sure that you tell the doctor about side effects and so on. All right, so let's think about all of these three possibilities about some things that we've already talked about. Your vocabulary is growing as you get older. Well, that's really from your own behavior. You're encountering new words on the evening news. You read a new word. You learn things in your job. You learn things from the newspaper. Your vocabulary is growing from your behavior of interacting in the world. Here's another one. Trouble remembering names and other words. Punchlines of jokes, all that stuff. Well, that one is, and becoming less tactful. Both of these are a combination of your own behavior and things that are out of our control. Yes, we are less able to bite our tongues now. Our brain is making it harder to do that. And we started declining in our ability to find words at around age 30, and it's just kept going. So part of that is, a bit out of your control, but we can do things to help to make things better. Yeah. So let me talk about the stuff that is in your control. Your brain slows down. That's partly out of our control. Our own behavior can keep our language and thinking sharp. So that means what you can control is keeping talking and interacting with people as much as you can. And that, reading and understanding language is great, that's good too. But the best thing you can do is get in situations where you yourself are doing talking a lot. And of course, you let the other person talk too. But yeah, where you and your friends are not just listening to something, but are actually talking, for example. So,
I have a quick
yeah,
question.
sure.
Is it possible that, like, I have friends who go to schools and they're helping in reading programs and they read to kids. Does reading out loud also help, your language ability?
The question is, would volunteering and reading to kids, does the reading out loud part help language and memory? Absolutely. That's a great one. Good for the volunteer, great for the kids.
Yeah.
Wonderful thing to do. Yes, yes.
So my dad is turning 93 on the 20th of this month. We're going out to see him after we leave here, throughout the country. And mom passed away about 7 years ago, so it's just he and the dog. But he talks to that dog a lot.
Talking to the dog is a fine thing to do. You want to talk to your plants? Talk to your plants. It's better if the plants and the dog can answer back, because you get a little bit more stimulation.
Yeah.
But talking everywhere is good. Yes, yes. So this picture and this one are meant to show and bring to your kind of awareness how your life might have changed with respect to social stimulation and talking. Young people who were at work talked to their colleagues. Some people wrote memos. That's a form of talking. It's like talking by writing. People get together as you are here and talk with each other. And those are all great. So part of your behavior of being volunteers or in the workforce or being in clubs is all part of helping your brain be sharp. One more question?
Yeah. I'm sorry. So that last picture, my last aunt is turning 96 on the 11th. And she plays bridge twice a week. She lives in a little condo community. And twice a week, she and a group of her friends play bridge for a few hours. So there's a lot of talking, a lot of thinking, blah, blah, blah. And she's really sharp.
That's, the point was about how getting together to play bridge was wonderful. My mother-in-law lived to 97 and she played bridge twice a week. Her mental faculties, especially thinking about cards, were really especially good. And so that kind of activity is fantastic. Okay, so you did all of these things. You had things that were keeping you sharp while at other points in your life. And for some people, not necessarily for you guys who are out and about coming to things, retirement has a very different quality. People sit alone, they watch TV, it's not that stimulating, and they don't talk themselves. So aging is not just a change in your brain or something that you can't control, it's a change in your behavior. And that change, or it can be, that those changes speed up the aging and speed up the decline of your mental capacities and your ability to use language and interact. So what you can do, and we'll get some examples, is to be more like these people here and less like this guy here who is not doing much besides sitting and watching the TV. Everybody sits and watches the TV sometimes, but don't let it be such a big deal and try to do other more integrated things. Okay, so the consequences of being somebody kind of isolated like this are, first, you get less practice talking. Practice makes everything easier, you know that. Talking is actually no different. The less practice you have talking, the more trouble you're going to have finding words. It's just practice like everything else in your life. And another one, if you don't talk any, you have this kind of pent-up demand to talk. And you may kind of just not be able to stop when you're in a situation where you can talk. Doctors often talk about, sometimes they have elderly patients who come in, they have a problem, the doctor's trying to get them to talk about the problem, and they're going on and on and on about what their son and their grandkids did. They just have to get some talking in, and that's not helping their interaction with the doctor. And it also reflects that they're too isolated, and they need somehow to find more talking activities. And if you're all pent up and don't have a lot of opportunities to talk, there may be more opportunities for you to blurt out something that's going to ruin your relationship with your grandkids or your neighbor or whatever. Okay, so then what do? You want to think about the behaviors, the things that you can control that strengthen language and thinking and so on. And this isn't rocket science, you'll know some of these, but knowing that you're in control of them, I think, is helpful. And knowing that practice is helpful also helps you. So, keep socializing and talking. I keep saying that. Walking and talking is a really wonderful one. Walking exercises your body, and talking exercises your mind. Enormous studies of elderly adults show that walking is really important and talking is really important. If you can, do a twofer and do both, you know? So those are really important things to do, but it doesn't stop there. You can do all kinds of social activities and games as much as you could find people to do them with. Obviously, bridge and other card games, book groups, board games, classes, bowling. I bet you've got a lot of stuff here that you can do. And the more you can do those, better. You can even play games that are specifically designed or to let you play with language, like Scrabble and Boggle and Hangman. Those are great too. And all of these activities are tuning up your language, tuning up your brain, making you a more fit elderly person. Yeah.
One thing I might suggest too is I've noticed that certain, for lack of a better word, certain support groups or, you know, knitting groups or, but more specifically, support groups. You know, you meet people that, things that are bothering you, you can call someone on the phone and, you know, and so that you don't have to share those things with every person and, you know, that, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I think I do know what you're trying to say. What you're saying is it's great to find a group or even a buddy who has some of the same issues that you have. Could be love of knitting,
Yep.
but it also could be irritation about your neighbor or worries about the government or whatever, and have people you can talk to about those things that are important to you.
Yeah.
And that's both talking practice and helping you work through issues that are bothering you, so you might be less likely to blurt it out somewhere and have a better interaction with other people in the world. Yeah. So these are great. Get together as much as you can with people. And it sometimes requires an effort, but those are great. But of course, sometimes you can't get out to socialize. It's February and you don't want to go out, and or you know, you just don't feel that great. So what can you do when you can't go out? There are still things that you can do to help keep your brain sharp. And those include reading books, reading online on your computer or pad or whatever, newspapers, magazines, all of that stuff are great, really great. So try to mix the TV consumption with something where you're actually reading, which is good. Yes?
I go to Al-Anon once or twice a week.
Mhm.
You know, I don't drink, but
You have a relative. Al-Anon is for
Yeah,
relatives
right.
or people you're
So,
close to. Yeah.
the two groups I go to, they both are hybrid, so they're in person and online. So in February, it's great to use my laptop and go online.
That's right. So if you can get a group that lets you go online to something in a bad weather situation, that is great. I agree. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention was that there's all kinds of word games that you can do yourself. And so a mix of TV and reading and doing some word games is wonderful for your brain compared to just sitting and watching TV for all of that time. So there's word search games. These are, I mean, there's many more. These are pretty ones, colorful ones that I found on the internet. There's many word games. This one must be about place names. I see Michigan over there, and there's Delaware and so forth. Crossword puzzles are great. Here's one, there's a lot of variants of this kind of puzzle where you get a letter in the center and some letters outside, and you need to make words with them, always using one with the letter in the center. Anybody see a word?
Yep. Trace.
Trace, T-R-A-C-E, great. Others? Boat, is it? Vote, I'm sorry, couldn't see it, V-O-T-E. There's rate, R-A-T-E, and lots more. There's different variants of this. Some get more points for longer words. Some you just count up the words. Those are great. And crossword puzzles are great. And word search are great. And in terms of the social games that you play, you know, bridge or Scrabble together, or all these games you play by yourself, a natural question is, which ones are the best for you? And the answer is the ones you like to do. Because doing them and practicing your talking and exercising your brain is the thing that is the best. So do what you enjoy, and try, when you can, to make the changes that are within your power to keep your brain tuned up as much as possible. And the more you enjoy it, the more you'll keep doing it, and that's great. So, that's what I have to tell you, and I'm happy to get any more questions. Thank you.
How was your studies during COVID?
How were my studies during COVID? That was hard. It's very hard to study talking and comprehending and reading and all of that. The way we used to do studies was ask people to come into our laboratory, young people, old people, sometimes even kids, and they would come in and we'd sit them in front of a computer or some other situation, and they would do their study. We had to move those into being online, remote, via a Zoom link or something like that. And that was hard. What if the person didn't understand what they were supposed to be doing? We just wasted a total hour of our time and their time. We did longer and longer explanations to people, and some people would kind of not do it. They just push yes to every question that they were supposed to be reading. Throw out those people. Everything was really hard. And it's great to be past the worst of all the COVID situation. Yeah.
Variables and skewed.
Everything, was quite a mess. You'd have to test twice as many research participants to get enough people who were paying attention, who understood what they were supposed to be doing. Their internet stayed up the whole time. That was another one, and all of that. Crazy.
With your study of language, I'm always saying, I taught Venus and he talks Mars. We're saying the same thing, but we're saying it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it sometimes frustrates me because I'll say something to him and he'll say it, but that's what I said, only you're saying it in a different
I'm
way.
always right.
Why is that?
Yeah. I have that with my husband too. I have to
Oh.
say. You know, it's when we talk in a lot of different ways, what we're doing is translating our own internal idea to some words. And that's actually really hard, and we're focusing on our idea and the words that support it. And we aren't aware of how the words can be taken differently, because we have the idea that we want to convey in our minds. It's on there, it's all lit up, we know exactly what it is that we're trying to say, and we've got some words which might be ambiguous or might be misleading, and we don't know it because they were good words to convey that idea that was the one we wanted to say. They also could be words to convey other ideas. We don't actually have the mental capacity while talking to monitor whether there might be something else that our words could be construed as. And so it's a really natural and necessary part of the way we talk that we don't have that capacity to monitor what might be going wrong. We rely on our listener to say, what? And then we can revise things. And if everybody knew that that's the natural way of talking, maybe people would be a little more relaxed about it. Because it's really a frustrating one. And I certainly know that. Well, I just said that. No, kind of thing. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, there could be many times I had to say, it's not what you said,
It's how you say it. Yes, it is true. And a lot of what we say does come out in our tone of voice and the words, you know. I'm leaving now could mean lots of different things depending on how you say it. And men and women, not always, but sometimes, are taught to talk in different ways. Women are supposed to be more tentative, more careful about making sure everybody is okay and keeping the social situation good, and men are supposed to say what they feel. Not always, but there's I'm not saying everybody's this way, but there's a lot of that, and those two social habits can kind of get in conflict.
And I also would think texting, when you text, that people may not understand that text.
Yeah, text is so
Yeah.
abbreviated
Yeah.
that it's an opportunity, and somebody will just have to do some question marks or say, what? And then texter will redo it again. Yeah, that's another
You're not
example.
hearing the
Yeah,
fluctuation of the, or
Right.
tone
Yeah.
of what,
Yeah.
how you're saying it.
that's right. And emojis are sometimes a good substitute for intonation. You put a little smiley face and something that kind of substitutes for a polite way of saying something, or a happy, nice way of saying something. And kids and people who text a lot have learned to do that substitution. Yes?
I just want to say, I think it's so important to be kind to ourselves. I remember, I was in my early 30s and I couldn't think of a word, and I said, we were talking and I said, oh, you know, it's that thing in the basement where the heat comes out, because I couldn't say furnace. And everybody laughed, and I said to myself, Jane, remember when you get old that you've always been like this.
Well, everybody has always
It's a
been
Peter
like this. That's right. Everybody has trouble finding words sometimes. And it increases when we're old, but you did it when I was 30. I did it when I was 30. We all did it. And usually, when somebody does it when they're 30, people say, oh, weird, and move on. When you do it now, they think, oh, they've got their foot in the grave, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And you don't buy into that. Everybody
Not
does
true.
it. It's a natural part of talking, is to mess up sometimes. It's a complicated process. Sometimes things aren't perfect. And it's okay. Anybody? Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna share too, as far as hearing, because, you know I have loss of hearing, but I don't have hearing aids. And so Jeff and I we've had to learn to, you know, face each other when we talk. Don't talk from the other room. And also that thing about the words, I think that I'm expressing something and, you know, it's way off in Jeff's understanding or vice versa. And to repeat or, you know. and
Revise what you
there
say,
go,
to say,
revise,
you know,
yes,
say
revise.
something in a different way. It's natural, it's not you, it's not your partner, it's not your roommate, it's the
Yeah.
way life works.
Yes, and that hearing issue.
And
You know,
it gets worse if you can't hear.
If we're in a restaurant, I used to with my dad. He lived to be 92 and my mom was 98, but with my dad, I'd say to the waitress, can you please give us a because my hearing isn't so good. My dad didn't wanna admit that his wasn't, but I knew mine wasn't. And so they give us a place, you know, less noisy, because, you know, with all that background noise, it's very hard.
Right, restaurants can be very difficult with hearing loss. A lot of restaurants these days try to be noisy because it makes it sound exciting and a fun place to be, but it's just deadly for hearing loss. Yes?
Yeah, I have hearing problems, and I got one hearing aid. One thing too is, I always want to have somebody facing me, because
Yeah.
I've more or less taught myself to read their lips.
Mm-hmm.
As their mouth is moving, I can perceive what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. The space on someone's, except when they have a microphone covering it, the space on someone's lips is extra information about what people are saying. And people sometimes say, oh, I can't hear you as well when my glasses are off, because you don't have your glasses on and
Yeah.
aren't able to see the lips well. So we have amazing systems of using language, taking every kind of information we have, like reading the lips and the hearing and the reading words, and we put it all together in amazing ways. And if your brain isn't, or your ears aren't so good on one thing, compensating like that makes a lot of sense. That's right. Yes.
So, Karen and I have been together for over 40 years. She's only 42. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did. You get a birthday present this year.
So, and we've been living together for, I don't know, 38 years, I guess. And about a year ago or so, my doctor told me that human communication is one of the most difficult things. And I swear there isn't a week goes by we don't tell each other that at least once.
Yes, human communication is difficult, and it is important, and it takes practice, and it really is important to keep doing it and not get too frustrated.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
that's really part of keeping everything going. Yeah.
I
Yes.
just wanted to say that a few years back, my sister told me about anomia,
Anomia, yes.
which is the inability to say a word.
It's the inability to say a word, nothing like what we have, you know, where we can't think of the name cul-de-sac or whatever.
Okay, that's not the same?
Well, it's like kind of transient, but anomia in the clinical sense, because there are patients who have a stroke and brain injury or other kind of brain injury, and they basically can't say much of anything. They could
Okay.
say, it's the, and you give them the name and they say, oh yeah, and basically almost every word is hard to find. And there's not a minute that goes by where they're not having a problem.
Is that the standard?
Is that the standard? Is that what anomia is?
Yes.
Or it's, you know, every patient is different, and other people could have anomia have a word finding difficulty once every 10 minutes, or every 5 minutes, and could still have clinical anomia. I'm not a clinician in that way, so I wouldn't necessarily want to say exactly what the cutoff is, but what you guys do and what I do, having occasional word finding difficulties, is typical and wouldn't rise to the level of anomia. But people who have left hemisphere strokes very often end up with some anomia, much more severe kind of trouble finding a word. Yeah.
Is there any way of making that better?
Speech therapy helps, but once you've damaged your brain with a stroke, it's not the best. You know, it's not. You're not going to get back to where you were probably, and so the best strategy is to try to keep things not going in that direction. Continue to exercise, continue to eat right, keep talking, And so it's not that they can't do anything, it's of limited, usually limited benefit, because the stroke actually killed cells in brain, neurons in your brain, and the ones that are left are not so skillful doing what you used to be able to do, so. Yes.
We know someone who is very well educated, very bright, has spent a lifetime helping people, and maybe 5 or so years ago was attacked and struck in the head. And on the outside, it seems like the same person we've always known and cared about. And we both noticed that this person is kind of, even though it seems the same, is kind of angry and less tactful and a little paranoid.
Yeah. So this comment was about after being attacked and having a head injury, this person seemed to have some change in personality and interaction style. It is possible that the injured areas were related to that. It's also possible that after being attacked, a person could become more paranoid, even if the brain weren't damaged. So there's probably some combination of the brain and the sort of current situation, and it's really sad. It's really unfortunate, yes. Yes?
If anybody likes to do puzzles, like crosswords and word search, Anne put out a whole stack of them in that
Yay.
dining room in there that you can pick up.
Word puzzles galore. Excellent.
So they're in there by the books.
Great.